Unlocked is brought to you by Invincible, a program designed to unlock the potential of people and teams inside your organization. Join companies like Pfizer, Delta, the CDC, Google, and Chick-fil-A, and others in over 116 countries that are currently using this program to increase productivity and develop healthy cultures. Access hundreds of hours of content that is accessible anytime, anywhere. And finally, use real-time data to understand the health of every team inside your organization, which teams are performing and which ones aren't. Then understand the why behind that performance. Get free access to Invincible for 30 days by visiting www.giant.tv/30days. Hi, welcome to another episode of Unlocked. I'm Skot, and today we're talking with Ed Offterdinger. And no, he's not German. He is in the Washington, D.C. area, but his ancestors, probably German, right? Ed has been in the leadership and development space for more than 30 years. He knows his stuff, and he just released a new book, and it's got a cool little twist to it. So we talk about that at the beginning of this interview. We also go into this idea of conscious capitalism. If you don't know what that is, stay tuned. Ed is going to tell us all about conscious capitalism and what that means. It's a big part of his book. It's a big part of his life, and it's a big part of his core belief system about business and how it is really, there to help better society. It's the best way to better society in general. So I'm really excited for you to hear that element of what we're doing here. We talk about the Great Resignation. We talk about this 4.3 million people that left their jobs, in August of 2021, which is, now it's October. That happened in August. The report just came out, and that's huge. So Ed has some insights about why that's happening and how great companies, what they're doing to prevent that from happening versus the companies where it's happening all the time. So I'm really looking forward to you hearing this interview. I'd love for some comments and some questions that you have for Ed or myself. Put those in the comments. If you're watching this on social media, do that. I would love to hear your thoughts. So let's get on with the interview with Ed. Here we go. Ed, welcome to the show. So good to have you.
Thanks, Scott. Good to be here.
Yeah, so you recently launched a book, Conscious, Capable, and Ready to Contribute.
I did.
So now, this is your first book, but you have been in this world of unlocking people for a long time. You're not a newbie to this space, so to say. So tell me about why now? Like, what is it in your career that you're like, I need to write a book, like, has it been something you've thought about for 20 years? And then all of a sudden it took you 20 years to get the courage to do it? Or what sparked it? What's the core essence of this?
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I would say I've known I was going to do it for 20 years. It wasn't the courage, it was the time. Because I was running firms and doing all kinds of stuff. I had, I think the most important thing to know in this regard is that all the time that I was managing partner and CEO of two different companies, I had an outside coach, and that was a fellow named Dave McGuire. I always look over to the left because his mask card is on my inspiration wall over here, and I think of Dave every day. And so I was always keeping track of things. I'm a journaler. I've been a writer essentially all along. And so when Catherine and I, after I retired from Baker Tilly, Catherine and I started a people development business and had ideas to get out. And one day she said, "Hey, you want to write this book? Why don't we write a fable?" And that's how it got started. And so that's what I did. And she wrote the how-to, and I wrote the fable, all about Andrew Hyde, Shift Advisors, and oh boy, how much fun they had as they almost lost the company.
Interesting. Okay. So it's not your typical book where it opens up with kind of case studies and a principle and kind of just goes through, necessarily not the only the how-to part, but you have this like story fable element to this. Okay. So what was the idea behind that?
Well, what we want to do, so if you think about audiences, obviously one of the things you want to do is choose the right vehicle to reach audiences. And one thing that, I mean, as my coaching clients know, I am constantly rolling to the left or rolling to the right and grabbing a book and saying, hey, why don't you try this? Or why don't you listen to this podcast? So I am constantly reading those great business books. And I love them. I mean, they're going all the way back to Built to Last really drove my early years of leadership. Adam Grant, I love, Dan Pink, as we were talking about before. But as we really got into it, Catherine knew that I wanted to write fiction. So that was an important element to it. I got that love from my grandmother and my mother, constantly reading. But, then you look at people like Pat Lencioni, who have managed to do pretty well with things like Five Dysfunctions of a Team. So it was just a genre that appealed to me and to us. And we got all of our how-tos. Andrew and his team discover all of the how-tos along the way of the story. So it's kind of a dual, you can get it two ways. You can get in the story, or you can wait to the end and read all about the capabilities and the life cycle and all the things that we believe are so important.
Okay. Very cool. So tell me about the title then. Conscious, capable, ready to contribute. What went into the title? What was the intentionality behind that?
Yeah. So there's three important words there: conscious, capable, and ready to contribute. And so if you really boil it down, what Catherine and I believe is that employee development, the building people's capabilities, and we've got certain capabilities that we think are the ones we need in the 21st century. But building those capabilities is really the best thing you can do for your business. There's sort of data coming out our ears proving that that's the case. It's obviously really, really good for people. But the thing that hit us was one day Catherine said to me, well, what if the point of all of this development is social contribution? That in some senses, if you develop your people and a broad, holistic set of skills, they're so positioned to contribute to society that in essence, it's about contribution. So we're big believers in intentionality. So consciousness, as I've mentioned before, I'm real involved in the conscious capitalism movement, which has conscious leadership and so forth. So when we were thinking about how to have something that sort of captured all of the things Andrew figures out, and then we talk about consciousness, building capabilities so that we can contribute to society. And that's why the subtitle is How Employee Development Can Become the Highest Form of Social Contribution.
So talk to me about conscious capitalism then. What that principle, you mentioned that a couple of times. You mentioned when we were kind of the pre-show, like chatting it up a little bit. I don't think a lot of people are necessarily familiar with that term. Talk to me about that.
It's funny. I was playing golf the other day, and a guy goes, conscious capitalism. So it's not quite an oxymoron, but the idea that he thought I said conscience, he said capitalist with conscience. Was like,
okay.
Well,
all right.
I have been known to say the problem is not capitalism. There are some bad capitalists, which is true. So conscious capitalism is a it's an international movement, actually started by John Mackey, who is the co-founder, really the CEO and founder of Whole Foods. He joined teams with a gentleman named Raj Sisodia. And in 2014, they published this, Conscious Capitalism. And it's really about the idea that business is really the best way to elevate humanity. And so in it, they talk, there are four basic tenets. I'm not going to go through the whole spiel, but number one, which most companies figure out, higher purpose. That's a Jim Collins special, right? So no great surprise there. Secondly, though, they have a stakeholder orientation. So that really comes from Ed Freeman at Darden down at UVA, which is this idea, as Mackey would say, that there really aren't any trade-offs. You can't, exclusively do everything for the customer at the cost to the employees. And similarly, you can't just do everything for the employees at the cost of the shareholders. You have to keep it all in balance. So these companies build elaborate stakeholder maps to really do You got to pay your taxes. You got to be a good corporate citizen. You got to deal with your suppliers, all of that. And then there's conscious leadership and conscious culture. And so the movement is really designed to inspire, educate, connect people that are of that mindset, running companies like that, want to run companies like that. And so I got into conscious capitalism sort of through Andrew Hyde, the character in the book. I can explain that in a second if you want. But so David Gardner, who is the co-founder of the Motley Fool here in DC, a very conscious company, John Mackey's on their board. He and I co-founded the DC chapter of Conscious Capitalism, and I chair that. So something I'm very, very involved in. And I feel like, people, I'll say one more thing, that there's a lot of people, and I feel this way about myself, that, gosh, I was a conscious capitalist all this time and I just didn't know it. I didn't know there was a term for it. And now an organized movement, which has been around about 7-8 years now, we're really starting to have great success all across the country.
Okay. Very cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that with me. Thanks for sharing the book too. I think I've seen that cover around. So really cool to bring that up. So yeah. So you mentioned Andrew. Tell me about that. I do want to hear about that.
Okay, so Andrew Hyde is a 50-year-old executive running a successful, by all measures, consulting firm in DC that does strategy and some other things. Totally fictional. And so, he's at a crossroads. So one day, I'm sitting in my office, I'm working on the story, and I'm thinking, okay, now, what kind of things would this Andrew Hyde character either be a part of or discover along the way? And I remembered the yellow book, Conscious Capitalism. And sure enough, I went online and there was the CEO summit of Conscious Capitalism. It was happening 3 weeks later in Austin, which was about 3 years ago. And I applied, I got in because I'd been a CEO. And I walked in and it was like, holy smokes, I met my tribe. So Andrew figuring out, and so conscious capitalism does permeate throughout our story too. It's an organizing set of principles actually for Andrew to run, Shift Advisors. He discovers it through his coach actually. But it was all because one day I'm sitting in my office trying to think about what this guy would be into. And sure enough, I remembered the yellow book and led me to Austin. And now I'm up to my eyeballs in conscious capitalism.
There you go. And to write about something that's so embedded in your belief system is definitely something that translates to the book. You can sense a book that comes from the core of someone, and that's what's really cool. So that's going to be interesting to kind of see how that translates into the effectiveness of how those principles are carried out through Andrew and what he does and how he exemplifies those principles and carries them out throughout the story. So really cool. I asked you in a question earlier about some of the big mistakes that companies make. So you've worked with numerous companies all over the place, executive level and teams, and understanding what is the biggest problem when it comes to company culture and how that shapes the effectiveness of what they do. You started by saying many companies start with a very defined mission and culture, but struggle to maintain that as they grow. And then it happens when key hires are made who don't share the values of the founders. So I can imagine that it's that principle of, oh, wow, we've got a rock star. This person is so good at this job. Like, we've got to go after this person. Their skill set is unbelievable. Their track record is unbelievable. And then it doesn't necessarily work out. Talk about that context a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, that some of it comes down to here's the way I would put it. I remember that when one of the firms that I was at, we had about 50 people, then it became 100 and so forth. And what I know from working with my clients too is that at some point you can't manage by eye contact. So what that means is you have to have systems and organization, and people need to know what the deal is. How does it work? What's important around here? And so when you asked me earlier also about what is your definition of company or corporate culture in the first place? To me, it's how things get done, who gets promoted, what kind of people get hired, who succeeds around here. And that, I think we think it's like, okay, we're going to have, is it a party culture or is it yes, that's all true, but it's really how things get done. And so I think it's very easy when you have, either you've started it yourself and you've got one or two partners and, you're managing it because you're choosing people and you're interviewing all of them. So what happens is, can happen through acquisition is another way. You've got a great idea, you're succeeding. Suddenly you're up here and you're delegating out. You have to, or you can succeed. And then what happens is you haven't really laid out in clear terms what all the things you're looking for in a particular person, which is not just the ability to sell or grow or whatever it is, but also those values, what's important. And it's so interesting because Catherine and I spent a lot of time working with companies on embedding all that into the life cycle. So if you want to hire people of a certain nature, character, diversity now, it can be done, but it won't happen unless you're not very conscious and intentional about it. And you can bake all that into the process. But I think that's largely, and that happened to Andrew in the story. He and Pat, who was his co-founder, they had a great, great start. They left another company because they were frustrated with got off track. And then they just succeeded. And then when that success happens, you get busy and you stop doing all the interviews. So I think it's a very common problem. And I think the solution, it's not simple, it's easy. I'm not saying it's simple. I'm not saying it's easy to do. And then it's, I remember John Cotter, who's the great Harvard guy on leading change. And one of the things he points out is, I've coined it as 10X. And I know in your practice, you've seen this too. And that's when you communicate, particularly with all the data that's thrown at us and employees today, when you think you've communicated a lot about something, values, the way we're going to do it, multiply by 10. You just need to stay at it. And I do think as we get busy as leaders, we just don't take the time to communicate as much as necessary. I think those are a couple of thoughts on that.
Okay, good. I can go with that. I want to also bring up this because you put a lot of weight on the values aspect of that, right? That the values aren't aligned with the company and they don't share the values of the founders, and through an acquisition and the company that's acquiring that other company, they're not aligned in their values, right? There's a big valuation and they're like, hey, let's do this thing, right? Like they're going to give us lots of money but those values are missed. And I know we talk a lot about values and we cram them down the throats of our organizations when we're coaching them and understanding what they are. But honestly, it's not that a company realistically looks at their values every day and goes, cool, like, let's talk about these today. No, nobody does that. Right. So why do we put so much emphasis on these values that sometimes get printed on a cool poster in our break room and they're in our employee manuals? And we say we're so concerned about the values of our companies, right? But then it's like a lot of people just roll their eyes at them. Either the employees roll their eyes because they're just like, oh yeah, those, like, I don't even know what they are, but everybody thinks they have to make them. So I don't know. Talk to me about this value discussion.
Sure. I'm laughing too, because in the story, Andrew and the team go out to this very successful company in suburbs of DC, and a great company. And they're laughing because he sees these amazing, simple values on the wall, but his experience had been basically what you said, which is you see a lot of rowing pictures.
Rowing. I love that. Rowing pictures.
Yeah,
right?
rowing pictures.
Talk about
Or
endurance and tenacity.
one of my all-time favorites was on the same list of values was to be focused specialists. And right below it says one-stop shop. How could that be?
What? Yes.
But they do it all the time. So
yeah, okay.
I'm not really, I mean, I am a big believer in being clear about them. But it's the more important point is back to the culture. How do things get done? So if you say you're about being focused, to my point, then you need to have something in your system that basically is a way to vet opportunities so that they're very limited. And you would actually train on that. You would, so sure, it's important what's on the wall, but it's more about have you baked in the how-to all those things into how you do things. And I think that's where it gets lost. It's too bad. Like so many things, when the first idea of, wow, these great companies have these core values, it was brilliant. I mean, when I first read Built to Last, it was 1990 or 89, no, late 90s. And, he discovered that great companies had done that. And then, of course, everybody turns around and goes and spends all this time and money with consultants like, let's go do this. And it becomes very inauthentic. And so I totally agree with you. But the point really there is, it's build it into what you do. That's what really matters. And it can be done. So I'm in complete agreement. And no more rowing pictures or climbing mountains.
No more, right? I don't want to see the back of somebody's silhouette, like, over the beautiful sunset. Yeah. And no more eagles flying into a picture of clouds and, whatever, and we're soaring. So I love that. I love the how to apply to the value. And when I was doing a lot of brand strategy for companies in my earlier career, it was always like, hey, we want to be innovative. It's like, okay, like I'll let you have that one, but I want to know what it means for you to be innovative and what does that mean for how you're going to actually execute that and how you're going to live that, right? So as an exercise, sometimes I'd run companies and say, all right, I want you to pick one value this month and I want to figure out how each person's going to live out that value. And you're going to think about it like, you're going to do it in your team meetings and you're going to just execute it. I want to see if like it sticks. And if it doesn't, you need to think about that value. Like, does it really matter? Does it drive what you're trying to do? Is it that guiding principle that helps you along the way? So I love your how-to principle that you put behind that value. That's really, really smart. So let me shift now the conversation because this is really timely that we're talking about this. We're talking about unlocking people. We're talking about employee involvement and engagement. We're talking about being intentional, and we have experienced the Great Resignation. In August, 4.3 million people left their jobs. They just said, peace, I'm out, right? And picked up and they left, feeling empowered, feeling like, hey, I've got places to go. I don't need this anymore. So talk to me about this. I mean, I'm kind of throwing this on you a little bit, but it's very timely in the news right now. And what's the difference between the successful companies that are not experiencing a huge resignation of people walking out versus the companies that are?
Yeah, I mean, it is timely. I mean, whether it's 4.3 million or 3% of the entire workforce, I mean, that was, we knew it was there. I've heard people call it the big quit. I remember reading an article back in March predicting the turnover tsunami. So they were right. I mean, here it comes. Before telling you what I think progressive companies are doing, and we're working with a lot of them, and I've thought a lot about this and I've captured it. I mean, I think we need to look at why too, right? I mean, so many people have sort of questioned everything over the last 18 months. They were thinking about their purpose. So the retirements are up also. It's not just people leaving to go, to another employer. They're just rethinking everything. So where to live? Should I be in the exurbs? Should I get out of the city? Those types of things. So I think it's just been a time of lots of introspection. And people have also, I mean, let's face it, their spending was down because they couldn't do anything. And the stock market was doing great. Interest rates are low. I am a recovering accountant after all, so I pay attention to these things. And so they feel a little more empowered. So I think there's a lot of reasons behind it. And then, gosh, politics, everything else, people are like, sheesh. But here's what I'm seeing, and I would boil it down to 5 or 6 things that I would recommend to everybody. First is leaders, you got to be flexible. I tell a story about my wife one time. I wanted to buy her a bathrobe at Nordstrom. And I got this, as I was telling you before that we jumped on, I've been married 40 years, so I'm still not a very good shopper for her, but I do know sizes. And I know what her size was. I get into the department and there's no small, medium, there's OSFA. I'm like, what the heck is that? One size fits all. And I say that because right now I am preaching and coaching, do not try one size fits all thinking. You have to be flexible right now as a leader because it's your own peril, because the companies that are being flexible with where their employees can work, how they want to work, what they want to do, they're winning. That's the number one place that company, they're not leaving, right? I also think some very practical things. People are getting crazy money thrown at them. I mean, a lot of it is short-term sign-on stuff. So if you were ever thinking about long-term incentive programs, now is the time to do it. I also think that, I spend a lot of time with HR people, so I don't want to say it the wrong way, but we all tend to think that certain things have to happen in a certain business cycle, i.e. raises and promotions. Who said that's true? So right now, wouldn't it make sense to look at all of your employee comp and benefits? Because the problem is you're probably giving big sign-on bonuses and having to pay raises to get people to come join your company. And the thing you should be most concerned about is internal equity. That somehow you have signed on all these people, and then Joe is sitting down the hall, and he's doing the same job, making 20% less. So I think that's another thing. Just that goes back to the flexibility. Listen, that's it. Listen, and for CEOs and anybody in leadership right now, get out and find out what's going on. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of stats here in a second, but getting out and listening, kind of like the listening, or third level listening, where you really are listening to what they're telling you is going on. So valuable. I say it this way: if you had a customer problem, what would you do? You'd go out and talk to the customer. You had an employee problem, and I have so many CEO clients who are just frustrated. We're all worn out by COVID, and they're like, "Can it be like it used to be?" Bad news. Probably never was that way, but it sure as heck isn't anymore. So I think that's it. And what I would say too, and this ties right into the book, it's something that we've always believed, and I've believed it for 25 years. 93% of employees, we saw in a recent, I don't know if it was SHRM or some good reputable source, 93% of employees say, if you would invest more in my development, I'd probably stay longer. So when I think about great businesses and one of the ones that I was fortunate enough to manage and partner, we were all about, our mission statement was deliver excellence and develop leaders. We published that. People are like, well, I know that's a good idea, but you're going to publish that? Well, that's what stays with you. And that builds brand to your area of expertise. When people know it's a great place to work, holy smokes. I'll give you one other statistic and then I'll take a breath. It's somewhere between, arguably on the low end, 50% and on the high end, 200% of an annual salary is what every turnover, every person who leaves costs you. And so it does, the math, Andrew's got a great scene in the story where he's trying to convince his partners to do all this stuff. And the math proves it. If you invest in this development and you lower your turnover just 1%, oh my gosh, you will. So if you're only about the economics, believe me, it works. So I'll take a breath. But that's what I'm seeing people doing and what I'm advising people to try.
Yeah, the flexibility is a huge thing, especially with this, global pandemic that happened. Everybody's working from home. Kids were at home, and all of a sudden parents are going, holy moly, how do I manage all of this? And now we're going back. Some kids are digital learning, you know, a majority of them are back at this point, but some are digital learning. And that flexibility of lifestyle of, hey, we recognize you have a family. We recognize that both spouses are working and that you have kids. And how are we going to treat you now within this environment? We have a company to run. So on that one side, it's like, we kind of have to get stuff done still, people. Like, I get that you have kids at home, but I really need this project delivered because it's a global pandemic and we are freaking out at the corporate level, right? And I know you're freaking out on a personal level that you're even going to have a job. So now you're kind of like, do I bend over backwards to accommodate my boss, or do I preserve the growth and development of my children? And there's a lot weighing in. So again, it's not an easy thing to do and juggle. But again, that empathy and understanding and that listening to each case, right? It's not a one size fits all, right? It's not a one bathrobe for everybody. It is this idea of, how does Jane need to be led right now? How does Tom need to be led right now? It's not how I want to be led. It's really how they need to be led in their own space. And you know what? It takes a lot of effort, doesn't it? That's like, you mean I gotta go talk to each person, like, and kind of understand, like, oh man, that sucks, you know, but it's so true. So I love those stats that you pulled out too, in that personal development, of the value that that has. And let's talk about that word soft skills, because that's kind of what you're talking about, these people, and how do we develop them? And sure, we can teach them how to do spreadsheets and calculate numbers and learn a skill. But when it comes to what the world knows as soft skills, which Simon Sinek calls human skills, right? They're really human skills. You have a little bit of a twist on that as well. You want to share that with us?
Sure. And that kind of ties back to the capabilities part of the title. So we think of it, first off, one of the things we like to say is that, soft skills is in and of itself a misnomer. There's actually nothing soft or easy about learning them. We also tend to think everything that isn't technical, we're going to call soft. So we think of them, and I do like the human skills, but we've bucketed them into sort of two categories: mind skills and people skills. And the mind skills are the ones that are really about, the brain's function, things like critical thinking. Whew, boy, the world could sure use a lot more of that, where you start a conversation without the answer in your mind already. Imagine that. Curiosity, being creative, decision making, which is, I do a lot of coaching and I work with the leadership circle, and it's really interesting to see the thing that, a lot of leaders struggle with being decisive, largely because they're trying to please everybody. But then, gosh, things don't get done. So we really, in the book, we define, there's a bunch of those categories, all of which Andrew discovers painfully through the story, and not just Andrew, but some of the other characters. And then we have people skills, which we think of as the ones you'd expect. Emotional intelligence. And I always like to say, most people are quite self-aware, actually. They're not so good at the self-regulation. so we're empathy, it's all about me. So you got to have EQ. So we've organized them different, got a couple, ones that we think are important. We actually think kindness is a people skill that if companies that actually act that way and humans that act that way, again, if you want to just think from a business standpoint, think about what it's like to be in somebody's orbit. And the kind people generally want to hang around. So kindness.
So wait. You're telling me not to be a jerk, right?
Yeah, real basic stuff.
Don't treat my customers like jerks, and don't treat my employees like a jerk, right?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's really radical.
That's brilliant. I love it.
And Andrew just, finds some, and it's funny, you get the vision in the story, you get to see how some other companies have done. A couple real quick, communication. And so communication skills are obvious, but you can teach listening, and as we were, listening is more important than speaking, actually. It truly is. You get a whole lot more. So we explain these. We talk a lot about how you can embed them into a learning culture in the story, in the book, both in the story and then in the back, how to build them into the life cycle along the way. And it's all about development. I would say it's the kind of development that it's not a new term, but it's a good one, which is VUCA, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. That's the world we live in today. And these kind of skills with AI, technical skills are needed. AI is taking away a lot of the basic. So what do we really need are these types of skills. I like the way Tom Friedman calls it the age of accelerations, where things are moving so fast. But these are the kind of skills that will help people thrive. Punchline of the book, they'll make you better at work. They will also make you better parents, husbands, friends, citizens, governors, presidents, who knows? But, and then all of that is sort of additive and generative to society. And that's kind of that's the big idea, if you will.
Very cool. Very cool. So last little question here. At the end of the day, what does it mean for you to have a great boss or to even be a great boss?
Can I tell you a story to get there? So in my, I don't know, probably late 20s, I was had a huge hotel client based in Bethesda, Maryland. You can figure out who it is. And I went to I had to make a presentation to the audit committee, and I was nervous. I mean, truthfully, it was a big group, CFO, chairman, all kinds. I'm not sure the founder was there, but might have been. But my boss was there, and then the managing partner was there. This is a big client of the firm, and I think my presentation might be 5 minutes. Maybe not even that. 3 slides, if there was such a thing as PowerPoint back then. And I got out of it, and not my boss, but my boss's boss came up to me and he said, "So how'd you think that went?" I'm thinking, well, okay. He goes, "This true story, and I'll leave the profanity out. He goes, they tell me, Eddie, that you're smart, but we would have no way of knowing based on that presentation." Ooh. So in that moment, and I've told this story 1,000 times, you're thinking, worst boss ever. But it's what happened next that made him the best boss ever. He said, "But you know what? We can do something about that." Within 2 weeks, they had me in Atlanta to Speakeasy, which is a 4-day program all about effective presentations and public speaking. And so that's what a great boss does. A great boss carefronts you, not my term. Joe Courier is the guy that taught me on. Tells you what you need to work on and then helps you learn. A bad boss, the guy in the middle, never said a word to me. He never said it was bad. He should have said I didn't do a good job. He should have held me. No, it was the boss. So to me, that's what makes a great boss, is someone who cares enough to tell you what you need to work on, but also helps you. Because yelling at you and telling you stink is just as bad as ignoring it almost. So that's what I think a great boss is.
That's awesome. And in my world, I call that high support, high challenge, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Offering, I'm here, high challenge, accountability, pushing you to be uncomfortable, telling you the hard things, but yet, hey, but that's high support too. I'm going to offer this training for you. We're going to build you up because we see the potential that you have. We're going to call you up to be the person that we believe that you are. So that's a fantastic story. Because when you first hear that, you're like, I can't imagine, that being said to me.
Yeah. I've used that pregnant pause for a long time. I used to do a manager training and they go, hold on, there's more.
Hold on. Yes. Oh, that's really, really good. I love it. So conscious, capable, ready to contribute. Where can we get a hold of that?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, et cetera, but probably the easiest way is to go to consciousandcapable.com, which is a website dedicated to it, and that'll take you to all of the things, including bulk purchases, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, et cetera. But you could go to Amazon and you find it, very quickly as well. So I appreciate you asking that great question.
I do my best, man. I do my best. So thanks a lot, Ed, for being on the show. Continue working to unlock those people out there, those leaders that are hopefully unlocking the people that are working with them and for them. Because it's all about multiplying, right? We can't do this one at a time. It's gotta catch on so that we're able to do this in mass quantities. So thanks for being on the show and sharing your insights.
And thanks for what you're doing.
There is a lot of good info in that interview. And we were kind of jumping around to some different topics because there was so much that I wanted to hit on based on some of the things that he had filled out in the questionnaire for this interview that I hope you were able to take with you. And a couple of those things, right? At the end, he gave us a couple of stats. 93% of people said that, hey, if you invest in my personal development, I'll probably stick around. In the midst of this economy that we're in right now and the employment situation that we're in right now, can you afford to lose anyone? Think about that. Can you, at this point in your career as running an organization or leading a team, can you afford to lose people? My guess is that no, because it's hard to find good people right now. It's hard to find good people that want to come work for you right now because they're being sought after by everyone. And it's costly. 50% to 200% of compensation to re-employ someone. That's what it costs to lose somebody. And can you really afford to lose that many people right now? Again, my guess is no. So a few things we can do. Flexibility, right? Think about your compensation plans. It doesn't have to be so stringent that it's on January 1st of every year that they get a raise or they don't get a raise. Think about your compensation plans. Think about what it takes to be a good boss. That story you shared with us at the end. What are we doing to be a good boss, to bring high support, high challenge? What are we doing to hold people accountable, make sure that they are pushed, growing, but also that we are investing in them, that we are being supportive, and that we are doing the things that we need to do to develop them as people, not only people, but also as employees in our organization. Thanks, Ed, for those insights. Thank you for being on the show, and good luck with the book launch. If y'all want to find out more about me, you can go to skotwaldron.com. You can go to my YouTube channel. I would love it if you would like, subscribe, and comment there. And if you have any questions for me, again, I am available. Contact me on LinkedIn. I am there all the time. And we'll see you next time on another episode of Unlocked.